maybe I could bring my cat and I could do the time tested. It always goes down smooth. Cabeceo.
Okay, see. I was inspired to do another episode on the Cabeceo.
Well, it
Just
never
seems to
gets old.
be an inexhaustible source of rich conversation.
Sure.
And one of the aspects of Cabeceo that we've talked about at length was that we both view the Cabeceo as something that takes place well before the dance floor Cabeceo happens. Like the fact that you might look at someone to invite them to dance, but before you do that, there might be all these other things that lead up.
Yeah. Cabeceo is just a shorthand for all the things you have to do to get a dance.
Right. That's how we view it. And I think for a lot of people, Cabeceo exists in this very traditional definition of like the act of.
Yeah, it's just a rule.
Right.
It's some kind of rule that I'm supposed to follow.
Right. And this episode, I think we want to, I guess, banter about these other ways that Cabeceo can be viewed, different ways that we can expand the concept so it's something that is a tool and something that we can develop our own style of versus something that, you know, you just have to do it this way. And if you don't do it this way, it's wrong. And, you know, you're supposed to sort of fall in line and do it the correct way.
Could you describe your Cabeceo style today? Do you have a Cabeceo style?
I mean,
Can you give it a name?
I feel like
Can you give it a make and model?
everybody's gonna fall somewhere on a spectrum between the really kind of shy and indirect way of pursuing a dance and something that's a bit more aggressive and has a little bit more energy behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, when we start digging inside of this concept, there's like so many ways that you could make it work. And the thing that makes it work is really the context.
Mm-hmm.
Cabeceo, your style of Cabeceo, your shade of Cabeceo that you tend to feel is the right thing to do in the moment is going to be reliant on the context, of course.
Okay.
And there's a lot of jokes that people make about the Cabeceo, and I thought we would sort of go through the different varieties of Cabeceo that we joke about.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, I'm serious about my Cabeceo. Ain't no jokes when it comes to my Cabeceo, honey. I'm all business.
Yeah, you are, and in fact, in some ways, the Cabeceo that you practice led to us being in a relationship and actually being married.
Oh, so that's how much a Cabeceo matters.
That's how much a Cabeceo can change your life.
Wow. Okay.
And and let's back up a little bit because I'm thinking some listeners might be joining the show and they don't even know what Cabeceo is because maybe they're brand new to Tango or. I want to start with the framework that people can agree on when they go to a milonga and what is expected of them. Okay. And I think the highlights of what people refer to as the correct way of doing the Cabeceo. Okay. Which is that you're supposed to catch the eye of your potential partner from at least 10 feet away. I feel like 10 feet is like the number that gets thrown around as a...
Oh, really? I didn't know that distance factored in.
The distance does factor in, that it needs to be some distance between you. You need to establish that distance, make eye contact, and if I'm inviting somebody to dance, I will nod my head to the side, kind of inviting the dance, and I'm waiting for the other person to nod the head in response, and that's when it's a signal to me as a leader. If I'm leading, I will go up to my follower and walk them to the dance floor, and then I will walk them back to their seat which is part of the tradition. It's part of good manners to walk your partner back to where they came from. And one of the things that the Cabeceo is supposed to prevent is a lot of awkward, embarrassing situations. That's why it's there. It's supposed to make it easy for people to say no and reject somebody without having to verbalize it or to be very obvious about it. And on the follower side, like when you're receiving the Cabeceo, it's to your advantage to wait to get up until they come to you. And actually, they're there to take your hand and walk with you, because frequently they might be looking at somebody next to you. And one of the most embarrassing Cabeceo situations for a follower is to get up out of your seat and be heading towards your partner, only to realize they're passing you go get someone else.
Pretty embarrassing for a leader, too.
I mean, I feel like it doesn't happen as much the same way with leaders, because leaders are the ones initiating.
Sure,
you know
but
what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely an equivalent of embarrassment there, because I've been in situations also when I nod to a specific leader and 3 heads nod back at me.
Yeah.
Because there's multiple people Cabeceoing me. So that's just part of the Cabeceo game. And when it comes to like being a very traditional setting, like you go to Buenos Aires and you spend time at a milonga that's very traditional, where women and men might be even sitting separately, then those are the kinds of expectations
which is something I'm only kind of recently being reminded of, that is a dynamic, that there would be one side of the room where there's men and one side that was women. And that if that was the expectation for how the room was set up, and that's when the Cabeceo was, as we currently understand it to be, was developed, it's reasonable then to ask a question like, well, then if in this society, if it's very different, like we just don't line up, at least in American cities, on separate sides of the room, then perhaps that form, that Cabeceo, isn't the best, right? It's actually inferior to something that could take place. Just to kind of make the point that when we appeal to history or sort of the way that things were done, if the appeal is being made in the sense that, well, it was the best way to do something, there's some reasonable arguments to say, well, the culture's changed, shifted, it's different now. Of course, you could just say like, well, it's just tradition and we just like tradition.
Right.
That's a different reason. Totally valid reason.
I think those are the two sides of the argument. Sure. There's, on the one side are the people who are saying, this is traditional, we need to preserve it. We need to preserve it to the best of our ability, because otherwise things are just going to go into chaos.
And another side says, hey, it's not really that practical, or it's just weird, strange, and I don't want to do it.
I think I fall somewhere in this middle ground where I prefer to use Cabeceo, and maybe not even because it's more functional or it makes it easier, but because it's more fun. It's actually more fun to go through that game of like trying to catch somebody's eye. And sometimes there's things at stake and you're like, you don't know if they're going to look back, and there's all this intrigue. And I feel like once you get past the rejection, the fear of rejection, it can become more like a scavenger hunt almost. Like you're hunting for who's going to be that next person that you're going to connect with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely. Which maybe is a little bit of a privileged position to be able to take. Like, oh, Cabeceo is just this sort of fun part, versus seeing it when we were beginning. It was like,
it was very stressful.
Damn, Cabeceo, like just asking for a dance, like. How hard is it to get a friggin' dance?
Yeah.
To say that now actually that's something you should really enjoy is really something that is privilege. It comes with years of experience and sort of seeing it as just one part of an overall game that we're playing here when we're out dancing instead of doing anything responsible.
Yeah, it's true. And I like that you use the word game, and I've been thinking a lot about the idea of a game or a sport, that when you go attend a particular sports game or if you're going to play it, you're going to be expected to learn certain forms of etiquette and rules. And this is just one of those things in tango. And granted, I don't think it needs to be as staunchly adhered to as some people demand.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it needs to be completely like disregarded. But there's a spectrum there.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, it will be part of the journey to discover like, how do you Cabeceo? What makes you comfortable in terms of that whole trajectory of like making connections with people? Like we talked about in some episodes about the fact that for some people, the traditional way of like looking across the room and catching the eye of a stranger is going to be easy because there's certain things that are in place that make it possible. But for some people, that might be too big of a jump.
What do you mean there's certain things in place that might make
like they might look a certain way, like somebody who comes into tango, they...
You mean like a good-looking person's going to have an easier time Cabeceoing?
Yes. Yeah, I was trying to be more politically correct. I'm trying to be like all inclusive
let's see.
here.
A hot 23-year-old. How's their Cabeceo? Yeah, basically, you. You know, they can look up and get
And for
dance.
guys too, I mean, if you have a young man such as yourself coming into Milonga Cabeceo, I mean, it's going to be very different than somebody who's much older, who's coming into on the scene at a later time in their life. So for those people, it's like, oh, well, tough luck. You could just have to like deal with it. I say no. You have to look to other strategies, which is you connect with people off the dance floor. You spend time in the community in other ways. You get introduced to people through people, and that kind of becomes a strategy.
Right. I was wondering when you think of your early Cabeceo, what animal spirit was your early Cabeceo? Or you could start with today. Like what is your Cabeceo like today? What's your animal spirit for your Cabeceo today?
I'm really into pounce Cabeceo.
Okay, so a jungle animal.
A jungle, definitely.
That attacks from above?
Leopard. Attacks from above. I could attack from anywhere. That's my power. I tend to kind of be like a little bit of a pounce Cabeceo in this way that I tend to look down a lot in between songs when I know people are looking at me, and I don't look at people. Mm-hmm. I want to be the person who kind of goes in a corner and I'm the one looking. Mm-hmm. Like I want to send out and I want to have that time to like choose who I'm going to dance with. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of like my strategy a lot of times.
You gotta pounce.
Is this sort of like
You're like feigning, like look at me. I'm just oblivious to what's going on until that moment when you're actually ready to.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm like really concerned with what's on my shirt right now.
Interesting.
And I like really need to adjust this right now, right here, and then I'm like, all right, let's go.
I see.
That's kind of my strategy.
It's like the camouflage for a human is to like look like they are the background, like the same way as a leopard in the grassland. Where do leopards live?
They live
jungles.
They live in the jungle. I mean, it's funny because our cat does that when he plays. Right, he goes behind furniture to hunt. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't want to just hunt right out for the toy there. He wants to hide first and then pounce on it. So I kind of have that same desire, I guess.
Well, that makes a ton of sense.
But also, and for followers, once again, sometimes this becomes a pretty obvious strategy right away for followers, but sometimes it needs to be vocalized that a lot of times fiddling with your shoe is an unspoken no in Cabeceo. Oh. Right? So if somebody's... Absolutely. If somebody's looking at you and like right if somebody looks at me right then and there, one of my ways is to bend over and fiddle with my shoe as a way of like showing with my body language that I'm not really interested. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's one of those unspoken rules.
So I'm thinking about the phone because phone is a distracting
Yeah.
element. I think there might have been a time when I used a phone a little bit, maybe in the same way, but today, definitely not. And I wonder how people might use their phones. I feel like generally, like, I don't see many phones out. Like, I don't see
Yeah.
people on their phones. I mean, from time to time, like, I'm on my phone sometimes.
It's very rare.
But yeah, like in Malanga,
Yeah.
generally, like the cell phones do kind of.
They come out to like take pictures or to video. But if I see anybody on their phone, that's definitely like an antisocial sign.
Mm-hmm.
Like I take it as a signal this person does not want to be engaging with the milonga at all. They just want their own time.
But you don't think it could just be something like the shoe, where they're just kind of doing it to like kind of be distracted?
Well, I don't know if I've seen it. I've seen that being used. I'm curious if our listeners might back you up on this, and maybe some people do use it. I tend to really be more on the side of being very active in my cabeceo.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like sit and wait to be looked at, which is for some people that's where they enter, right? For followers, when I first started following, it was very much a waiting game. You just sit and wait. And in those scenarios, when women sit and wait, that's when fiddling with the shoes becomes more of a signal, right? Because they're waiting to be looked at. And if somebody looks at them and they bend over and start fiddling with their shoe, that's more clear sign that they're not interested.
I'm going into a event where I'm going to be doing a lot more following.
That's right.
And so I've been thinking about how I'm going to work my cabeceo. Like, I'm going to have to do something where they look at me and they don't just see me as background.
You got to bat your eyelashes and dip your head a little bit and kind of do a little Mona Lisa smile.
I guess that would be one way.
The way I have to work extra to get the attention of women as a leader, you're going to have to work extra as a man to get the attention of other men.
Yeah. Whatever the difficulty is, I need to work through that. Like, I need to find some kind of angle.
The point is that whether you are in a certain category of dancer, like special case, you're a man looking to follow, I'm a woman looking to lead, sticking to the very rigid structure of the cabeceo might not work. And that's where other tools have to come in. So this is where the cabeceo is born, right? Like dancers make a lot of jokes about the cabeceo, and some people are like, oh, he didn't even cabeceo, he just cabeceo'd her. Like, and there's this anger at the fact that some people chat other people up in order to get the dance. But I think in a way, that's a strategy that people have to employ sometimes. So for you, if you were to come to me and ask what you could do to increase your chances of getting a dance as a male follower, I'd say you got to talk to these dudes ahead of time and let them know that's what you're wanting.
Yeah.
And so that's part of cabeceo. And it doesn't have to be creepy where you're like, come in and try to like corner them into talking, and then and then you're like, want to dance? Like, that can be a cabeceo. I see those kinds of cabeceos, and they can have different level of cringe depending on the context, right? But I think it's a really nice strategy that I've seen working really well, is that if you approach people off the dance floor outside of the cabeceo context and just say, hey, I just would love to dance with you. I'm a leader, or I'm looking to follow some leaders, and you just let them know that's what your desire is. This is kind of like a non-confrontational way to be like, hey, just so you know, I want to dance with you. And I think that's a really nice gesture, because there's a lot of people who would never look at you otherwise. They just don't even think that you'd be interested. What other seos that you've experienced?
I think one of my favorite one was the elevator seo.
The elevator seo. What is the elevator seo?
I just stood behind a couch, or I was behind a couch, and then I just peeked my head up and saw like the first person who looked at me, I kept rising, just kept like standing up straight. And it's a weird thing to see a head just rise above a couch. So it could work. I mean, you laugh, but I mean, it worked.
Elevator Seo.
Elevator Seo.
I'm like,
You could do an escalator Seo. Basically take that scene in Austin Powers when he's doing all that stuff to make her laugh. I mean, that's good Cabeceo game.
Make fun, make light of it.
Yeah.
Make it comical, make it funny. And I gotta say, it comes really natural to you. You are very good at just making people laugh and making it lighthearted. And I think I
got a short memory. The embarrassment doesn't linger too long.
But I think it's nice that if you're a person who has that sort of lighthearted side of you, and you tend to be pretty outgoing and you like to joke around, that can be part of your style of connecting with other people. And I feel like it might not work every time, and it might not be appropriate for each milonga.
It might crash and burn
It might crash and burn. It might.
That happens too.
But the crash and burn is, once again, kind of you testing out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think as long as the intention is to be respectful, and you're coming from a place of wanting to connect, rather than like you're trying to score, context really matters. And of whatever style of connecting with other people you end up practicing on the way to Cabeceo, on the way to the real thing, is really going to be your interaction with lots of different elements. So some events that I go to, I can tell that I'm going to have to Cabeceo more traditionally across the board. Like, I can tell it's not going to be as appropriate for me to try to, just chat with people and invite them. And I'll do the work of like, I'll chat with the person. Let's say I'm getting to know someone, and then I'll walk away, stand across the room, and Cabeceo them. Like, I will do that work. Other times I can just be sitting next to someone, like the afternoon milonga we attend locally. A lot of times it's so casual, and most of the people I know personally. So a lot of times I'll be sitting next to them, a song will come on, and I'll just be like, do you feel like dancing? And it will be more of like a verbal ask. But it's definitely the sensitivity to the context that makes you get away with what would be called breaking the rules of Cabeceo. Like when people are like, how come I practice my Cabeceo all the time and that person over there gets away with not following the rules? And a lot of times it's because they find a way to do it in such a way that doesn't disrupt the flow, or doesn't disrupt the culture overall. Now, in the US, and this is different from Buenos Aires, I think, what we have access to also is the snackaseo, which I think the snackaseo is best at events where you actually have like a good table with lots of different snacks. It doesn't work when there's like crackers and some tangerines. When there's like a nice spread and you can really hang out by the table. Sometimes those tables are set up in even a different room. And I noticed that a lot of times I'll go just to have a snack, and I'll end up chatting with someone for a while. And it won't be anything to do with me trying to get a dance, but very often it naturally just leads to a dance. And I think with all of these Cabeceo situations, the key ingredient is not to come across desperate. And sometimes that's hard, because I've noticed from myself even, I might just be minding my own business, having a snack, and suddenly somebody talks to me that I didn't think they liked me, or I never thought I could get their attention, and suddenly they're talking to me, and I start kind of thinking to myself, my gears are turning, how am I going to score Cabeceo? What's playing next? And at that point, it's sort of, you miss out on a lot of like other potential magic that can happen. So one rule I have for myself a lot of times, if I am, doing some sort of connecting off the dance floor, to just turn down that desperation, even if I'm at that place where I'm dissatisfied with how many dances I've gotten, to not use every time I talk to someone as an opportunity to like send out a hook for a dance. That's kind of important.
Yeah. I think I told you about the dressing down I got from a very young tango dancer when I asked her if she wanted to dance, and we were already 2 songs in at this point. And
so this was a Cabeceo? Or what kind of Cabeceo was this?
I wouldn't describe it as a Cabeceo as much as we happened to be talking, and then I asked her if she wanted to dance the rest of the.
That's a Cabeceo. That's like the classic Cabeceo.
I guess it is. I guess I you know what that reveals is that I still have some judgment of the Cabeceo, right? Because what I hear when you say that is I was talking to her with the intention of asking her to dance, as opposed to we were chatting and I just kind of realized, oh, I actually do like this song. Like, I think the first song that was played, I wasn't really into, but then the second song was like, yeah, it's kind of decent. Like, I actually would like to dance this. And then asked her to dance. And she said no, or she didn't say no, but she pointed out that this was a rude thing to do in Buenos Aires, I guess, according to some rules. And I'm just like, listen. And then somebody else was there and then they kind of went back and forth about how, it was like kind of a thing that people would do this when they actually don't want to dance with somebody, ask them to dance the last tune. And I was like, okay. So I'm listening to all this. Smash cut to, another song plays and she's like, oh, I really like this song. And it was like, yeah, like this.
But that's true. That's what you come up against. A lot of times the very traditional outlook is like, if it's halfway in the tanda, you're not supposed to.
Yeah. I guess, right.
Really
That's what she was, saying. And I was like, all right, like you could say, sure. And just like Cabeceo, like you can go, yes, I'm going to subscribe to that, to this system, or you could say, no. Like, you could just do what you want.
Well, different personalities will want to push the boundaries differently. And for some people, you asking them to dance in the middle of the tanda is definitely sort of crossing some sort of line. For other people, it won't be. And it's not until you try and fail that you find out what those boundaries are for other people.
Right.
And at that point, it doesn't really matter that they believe one thing, you believe another thing. It matters just to respect what the other person's preference is. So if I know that somebody is a really devoted practitioner of Cabeceo, I'm going to do the right thing and Cabeceo them in the style that they prefer. Like, I'm not going to impose my values on them. And I think that's important in the global context of tango, because Cabeceo adapts to every community differently. And, there are some communities in the world where Cabeceo between strangers does not even exist. You just don't dance with somebody you don't know through Cabeceo. You have to be introduced. Someone has to introduce you. And we have to understand that that's like a tool, that it's not like we need to serve the tool, but the tool serves us. Right. And I think the style of Cabeceo that you choose is very much the style of how you choose to connect with other people. It's part of your personality. I want to finish with my favorite type of Cabeceo, which I haven't come up with a name for it yet. The working title is a post-milongaseo, but in your case, honey, it's the Grabeceo. It's the Grabeceo, because this is how you Cabeceo'd me for the very first time when we were at the same milonga. And I think what you did was probably not going to be acceptable for most situations.
So I was breaking the rules.
Because you were breaking the rules.
I guess I'm a little bit of a bad boy.
But the moral of the story is you never know where your Cabeceo can lead.
Yeah. So,
and I know you don't remember this.
Yeah, well, how did it go down?
How did you do it? So it was at the milonga that I used to co-organize on Wednesday nights. in Portland, in Oregon. And had clocked you that you were there, but I didn't know who you were. And I was, doing my thing. And at some point at the end, when I was sort of taking care of things, you were chatting with somebody by the water fountain. And I was passing you. And I remember you stopped me. You put your hand on my elbow.
That's
and
the
you're
grab.
like, the
So
Cabeceo.
I put a hand on you. I didn't
laid
grab.
a hand on me. You hooked my elbow. There was a hook of the elbow, like stopping me.
A little aggressive.
In my momentum towards my destination.
Okay.
And you looked at me with that cute face of yours.
But was I smiling or was I?
You were.
Stern?
You had a smirk. You had one of your James Bond smirks, and you just said, "Hey, sorry we didn't get to dance."
Like that.
Just like that. Just like that. And I was like, I looked at you, and I remember it was like, okay. And I just continued going. But it was memorable, and I did get to dance with you the next night, on Thursday night. But I mean, I remember this moment in my life, and now, we're married, so you never know where your Cabeceo is going to lead you.
I have a yeah, that sounds about right.
But I'm going to just put it in the category of a post-milongaseo, which I think is actually a really, really nice strategy that I've seen working for a lot of people. And I'm not the one who came up with it, actually. One of my friends came up with this, and she told me that it worked really well. And that is, if you go to milonga and there is a dancer that you really want to dance with, you don't get a dance with them. After the milonga is done, you can come up to them and just say, hey, just so you know, would love to grab a dance with you. And it works whether you're a follower or a leader, but just to put it out there and say that that's what you're looking for. And I think what it does is, first of all, it gives you a peace of mind that the other person knows. And if the next time you see them, if they do not return your Cabeceo, well, then you don't have to wander anymore. You can just move on with your life because they knew, and it kind of frees you up. And if it hurts that they rejected you, whatever, like you can move on, but it's clear. But a lot of times I've noticed what happens is the other person goes, oh my God, really? Me too. I've wanted to dance with you too. And I didn't know. So a lot of times you don't realize that you're sort of keeping certain people off limits just because we got our own stuff we're dealing with and we feel like we're not good enough. So coming up to them after, when there's no pressure, there's no expectation, and just being nice and say, hey, I've really enjoyed watching you dance, would love to dance with you, is a really nice thing to do. The same approach, the same words that you might say in this little post-milongaseo, if you change the context and you put that same exchange before an event, rings completely different. Okay?
Right.
Not appropriate. Do not come up to a person before milonga and say, hey, I really want to get a dance with you. Like, that's too much pressure. That's aggressive. Now you're putting the person in the corner. Now they're like, oh my gosh, are they expecting me to accept a Cabeceo? Because some men do this almost like they're trying to secure the Cabeceo, that they're not going to get rejected later. So they'll come up like, hey, by the way, I really want to dance with you. Then it becomes a little weird. Then it puts me in a place where I need to escape them or somehow ignore them. Now it makes it more awkward. But if you do it after the milonga, it's it lands very differently. So in my mind, it's like, that's where the context is so important. And your style of connecting with people can really adapt to different contexts.
Yeah. This would have been back in 2017 when I did, or 2016 probably. So
2017.
Maybe today, yeah. Maybe at least, no grabbing.
No physical contact.
Just put your hand out to try to kind of block their space, but then, just kind of, hey, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to dance with you.
You definitely said, sorry we didn't get to dance. It wasn't, I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to dance with you. That's much more polite. I mean, you were throwing out a hook, honey. I don't blame you. It works. So, with our listeners, if you're still listening to this podcast and you're enjoying it, we would love for you to sign up and subscribe, and maybe even give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That would be awesome. You can also join my private Facebook group where I do live banters on a weekly basis on Fridays. And if you have other Cabeceo style stories, other Cabeceo fails, good Cabeceo fails that you want to share with us,
I want to hear those.
we want to hear them. So post them in the comments. We'll banter on next week. Ciao.
And I can do the time tested. It always goes down smooth. Cabeceo.
Cabeceo. Why don't you show him that angle so the Cabeceo?
I mean, wouldn't you dance with this? Wouldn't you dance with this? Hey, come dance with me.